Greetings and salutations. Welcome to Solnar's Minis. Today we're going to finish up Bennu, a 54mm miniature from Labyrinth Models. Before we get going though, I would like to ask you to subscribe or like this channel, or even this video. It would help my channel grow. And as always, paint fearlessly. It's just paint. You can fix any mistakes that you make. On the screen, we have some of the paints that I used in painting up Bennu's skin and part of the base. A more comprehensive list will be in the description. We're going to start off by painting over any spots where other paint had touched Bennu's skin. For this, I'm going to use Reaper Miniatures Dark Skin, and I'm just going to go around and paint up all the areas that I made a mistake and touched her skin with another color. I should also mention at this point that I did all of Bennu's non-metallic metal work and her gems off camera. I did this because I did not feel comfortable enough in trying to show someone how to do non-metallic gold or gold-like metals. I hope you guys can forgive me, but that is the reason why those areas appear to be done. As well as the gems are fairly straightforward. They're just painted black, and then I painted Games Workshop Blood for the Blood God over them to give them the shiny kind of dark red look. After I'd finished doing the touch-ups on Bennu's skin, I wanted to begin the process of highlighting her skin up. To do this, I applied this first initial highlight over larger regions than one would expect. Skin, especially female skin, is not just a quick gradient of light and dark. So I wanted to provide a much broader sense of gradual work up towards the highlights. To do this first layer, I mixed up 2 parts Reaper Miniatures Dark Flesh to 1 part Reaper Miniatures Dark Flesh highlights. After I'd finished that layer, I moved on to the next, which is a 1-to-1 ratio of Reaper Miniatures Dark Flesh and Reaper Miniatures Dark Flesh highlights. And I'm going to just go around and start to provide smaller and smaller areas of highlights. As I go through all this, it is a series of mixtures. So after I finish with the 1-to-1 ratio of Dark Flesh and Dark Flesh highlight, I went and did a 2-to-1 ratio, which is 2 parts Dark Flesh highlight with 1 part Dark Flesh. Eventually I will get down to just pure Dark Flesh highlight, and then I will be continuing to raise this highlight by adding in another color, and that color will be Olive Skin Shadow. So after I get done with the layer of just pure Dark Flesh highlight, I will begin a ratio much the same as I did with the Dark Flesh, which is going to be a 2-to-1 ratio of Dark Flesh highlight and Olive Skin Shadow, and then a 1-to-1 ratio, and then when I'm finally done, it's going to be like a pure Olive Flesh Shadow. So I'm just going to go around and paint. I hope you guys enjoy the different areas. You'll see the paint get lighter, and you'll start to see me to do like narrowing down where I think the muscle would be underneath the skin. It's going to be noticeable in the abdomen. There's also going to be a couple spots on the legs where I tried to provide, like, someone who's in shape has some very definite like hills and valleys in their skin. The sculpt has it a little bit, but I kind of accentuated it more. Once I get done with this part, we'll start to move on to the base, and when we get there, I will start speaking at you again. So now we begin to work on the base, and these are my initial bits that I threw out on the table. 2 pieces of cork, a 28mm arrow, and a branch. And basically the process is fairly organic. It's easier for some people and harder for others. For me, I already knew kind of what I had in mind for the scene that Bennu was in. I had mentioned earlier in a previous video that I wanted her to be like at that moment right before she flees and leaves her sisters behind to the ambushers, who happen to be dark elves. It's even more terrifying because in my mind, these are dark elves who struck during the day. Now, depending on your version of dark elves, that may not be so terrifying, but the fact that they're dark elves ambushing these Sehkmet Hunters, it's kind of a big deal in this scene. So I'm just playing around with where I want to place things. I placed 1 cork down, didn't think it was enough. Put the piece of wood down, and I was like, still not enough, so I put the other cork on top of the other rock to give some height. After I'd figured out how I wanted to set it up, I needed to go ahead and paint everything. And for this, I'm going to start off with the rock, and I'm going to start off with other colors other than gray to start off with. This rock will end up looking gray, but I'm going to add 3 colors to it. The first of these is Army Painter's Desert Tan. The second will be a dark green from Army Painter called Cairnwraith. And the last color is going to be Darkstone Brown. And I will paint these on and mix them while they're wet, so we'll get a little bit of wet blending and get some different color variations, as well as just the pure colors that I'm putting on here. In nature, rock is not just made up of one color. It appears to be one color from a distance, but as we get closer, most time people pick up the other colors that are found within rock. There are some exceptions to this, but in general, that's how rock works. So I'm going to go ahead and paint this up, and once I am done painting it, I am going to end up shading it with a black wash, which I will do later in this video. After I was done with the Desert Tan from Army Painter, I went ahead and applied that dark green color Cairnwraith over part of the stone. Unfortunately, I did not film me doing the Darkstone painted process on this, but I think you can see in here where I kind of started to apply paint and mix them together to get some different color variation. While the bolt has a very small part to play in the base, as with everything else, you need to paint it and do your best that you can on it. For this, I'm going to paint the shaft of the bolt with dark stone brown from Army Painter. I wanted to start off with a dark brown and set a more sinister tone to this bolt. I ultimately will end up using oak brown on it as well, and mix the dark stone and the oak brown later on to provide highlights. The tree, or the sapling, I decided to mix my own color for the base tone. And for this, I mixed the Cairnwraith green and oak brown together to get this kind of like murky, darkish, brownish green color. I was pretty happy with this. I wanted something that was a little bit darker than normal. Just give us the feel of this entire diorama is meant to be a little bit more dark, as she is going to flee and leave her friends behind. I felt it kind of set the mood a little bit. And I'm just going to go around and apply this base color all over this branch. And you can see in the background that I've applied that Darkstone brown to the rock underneath. I noticed that my camera was focusing on the scalpel or the hobby blade, and I needed it to focus in on the branch. Moving on, we're going to go from the branch, and we're just going to go ahead after it's dry, apply a brown wash. In this case, it's going to be Agrax Earthshade, kind of bring the browniness out, but also leaves that green paint mixed in with the brown paint mixture kind of showing through. And we're just going to go around and start to shade everything. Like I said, I used Agrax Earthshade on this. And I'm going to be using a dark black wash. It's supposed to be a dipping wash, but you can use a brush with it as well. You can see it off to the side of the video there. And we're going to use that on the rock. And this is just me going around and doing that. After the shade dried, I needed to go ahead and bring this rock up in coloration. Now, it might seem a little weird, but I went and did a medium gray for my first dry brush on this set of rocks. As I had mentioned earlier, the browns and the greens and the tan that are on this rock is meant to provide color variation that you can see even after I do this highlight, this dry brush of a medium gray. It's going to be present in the recesses of the rocks. It's going to be present if you kind of look at it. You'll see that the gray is slightly different in different areas. That is what it's designed for. So this is what it looks like after I have done this dark gray dry brush. I also did a light gray dry brush for the edges. I thought I took video of this, but apparently either A, I didn't hit record, or it didn't keep for some reason. So this is the rock on the base. I painted the ground as well with a brown. This is in case when I put the base and paste on it, if it doesn't cover correctly, there's at least still a color there. And then this is me trying to put the sapling on. Thought the glue had adhered to it. It did not. It fell off, so I'm just doing it again and waiting patiently for it to dry and hold. Once the sapling was firmly attached to the base, I began the process of adding base and paste to the model. Now I am going to put a little bit of this on the top of the rocks. You'll see why when we get there, but it just kind of help also just give some extra texture and coloration on the rock. I'm doing on the back underneath because otherwise it's going to be kind of a empty area with nothing there, and that just doesn't look right when you're doing these sort of things. So I'm just going to go around and apply this base and paste everywhere on the ground it needs to be. This is a long process. Also trying real hard not to hit her feet and cover her feet, though that might look a little bit realistic. Given the type of ground I'm doing, it wouldn't look totally appropriate. And this is probably the most tedious part when doing bases like this. I know that I want this to be in a forest, so I need to have the soil, aka the base and paste, present in order to make it look more realistic. Base and paste is still a paint. It just has material mixed in with it. So if you get it someplace that you don't want it, like I did on the edge of the base there, you can go ahead and wipe it away with your finger, or you can use like a wet brush that you don't care about. Anything of that nature to kind of clean it up and get it away from where you don't want it. After the basin paste is dried, I went ahead and applied a shade to it, as ground is never just brown. So I made a mixture, believe it or not. This is 1 part Biel-Tan Green and 1 part Agrax Earthshade, and still it's a pretty bright green color, which was fine. I kind of wanted this like forested look, so soil is not just brown, it's a mixture of other colors, and there's a little bit more algae, maybe moss in this ground than one would expect, given that it's a forest, maybe even a tropical forest type situation. After this was applied, I decided I needed to highlight up the sapling. For this, I used oak brown, and this was just to provide areas where I thought like maybe the sun was hidden more, or it just seemed to get more light, and I wanted to give it a slightly brighter look than the drab green brown that was underneath. After the shade was completely dried on the base and paste, I went ahead and used the same color and did a rough dry brush to bring the brown coloration back up a little bit more. Here you can see where I had applied that brown to the ground, and I then started to apply these dead leaves. Now I had made these leaves by using a brown construction paper and a leaf punch that I got from Green Stuff World. I got this a long time ago, well before the current situation going on with Green Stuff World. I like the punch. It's nice to add a little bit more texture and visual interest to these models, so I just applied these to various areas. I also soaked these a little bit in a brown wash made from oak brown and water, just to help them stick to the base a little bit more without having to use a lot of glue to do so. And all I did was just take them on a brush, picked a few up, and then just put them into place where I wanted them. After I applied all those dead leaves, I went about to applying some greenery to this base. I started off with Huge Minis Forest Scatter. To apply it, I put down some PVA glue, aka Elmer's glue, and sprinkled this scatter all over it. I allowed it to dry, and once dry I tapped off the excess and decided I needed some variation in height and color in the green. So I decided to go ahead and apply some grass tufts from Gamer's Grass and from Army Painter's line. The Army Painter's grass tuft is the one on top of the rock behind Bennu that has the little white flowers in it. The Gamer's Grass is the darker green grass tufts of various heights. Those are 4mm and 6mm heights, respectively. I then went ahead a little bit later and added some more Gamer Grass, 2mm size, around the Army Painter's flowers to give it the look as if it is spreading outward, and it's a little bit more brighter green in coloration than these darker grass green tufts that I'm putting on here. I was going around and adding them, and I was looking at it, and I was like, it seems a little off balance, and I was trying to figure out where I wanted to put another one, and I was kind of looking around, and I was thinking about close towards the front, and I said, no, I got enough there. Wanted a little bit more open space on that one side since we had the tree. While I was thinking about it, I pressed down that one grass tuft to make sure it stuck a little bit better. I was looking at it from above, trying to get a look at the composition, and decided that I needed it on the base behind the tree. Not before the tree, but kind of in this blank spot in between the rocks to give it a slightly different look. And then I decided that in order to finish this, I needed to show the danger involved for Bennu. And for this, I decided to have the bolt skimming past her leg. Didn't full on hit her, but it was enough to galvanize her in my mind to move. And so while I have this off screen, what I'm trying to do is I'm just trying to figure out where I wanted to put that bolt. I put down some glue. Again, you can't see it because for some reason all this is out of shot. Because reasons. I just have to laugh about it because this is what happens when you're not in front of the camera for a while. Or in my case, as I'm getting down to getting this done and I'm finally putting the bolt on, I realize that the angle on the camera had shifted. I might have knocked it with my shoulder when I went to go do some of this stuff. So I'm going to set her down and then I'm going to shift the angle so you can see what's there, but it doesn't matter because I've already done it. So after I put the bolt down, I still have a few things left to do on this. I am going to go ahead and apply, I believe, blood at this point in various spots on the rock. Yep. Again, apologize for the angle on this. I'm not sure. It must just been my bad while I was filming at this time. Alright, I'm pretty excited. We're near the end of putting this model together. The scene is almost complete. The only thing left is to put foliage on this tree or sapling, however you envision it. And I have several colors I could choose from for clump foliage, but I decided to go with dark green. Why dark green? I think that the dark green fit the mood a little bit more than a light green or yellow green would have at this point. I'm trying to go with a slightly darker foreboding scene, like Bennu is at this point where she needs to get moving. Her friends are yelling at her to run, but she doesn't want to leave them. And yes, the bolt galvanizes her, but we want to sell the idea that this is not a bright and cheerful scene. So I'm going to go ahead and apply this dark foliage. I'm pretty happy when I'm done applying all where it's all at and how it looks. I'm going to talk very briefly about the composition and how I came up with it in my mind. I know I said it was kind of a natural process, but and I also said I had a scene in mind. As I had said in the other video, they're yelling at her for to run, to go warn the Pharaoh and the Pharaohess. They apparently found something that made them realize that one of them needed to get away, and they had chose Bennu. The rocks represent, in my mind, the difficulty that Bennu is having leaving her friends behind. She feels like she is in a situation that is unwinnable for her, no matter what she does. If she does flee and she warns the Pharaoh and the Pharaohess, she loses her friends. If she doesn't flee, then the Pharaoh and the Pharaohess don't ever get the information, and then they will never know what's coming. So I want to take a moment to thank you all for watching this video, especially if you made it this far. I really, really appreciate you sticking around and supporting me. I would also really like it if you haven't already, if you'd like this video or subscribe to my channel. Once again, thank you so much. I appreciate you. You guys all have a wonderful day, and I will see you next time.